Alright, hi, welcome. Thank you for watching this video. And this video is gonna be about philosophy and mostly talking shit about philosophy. Just kidding. Basically, this is where I would discuss rationalism and empiricism. So this might be a two-part series, but I'll just start first on rationalism, which I would be focusing on Meditations by René Descartes and applying it to Noli Tangere by Jose Rizal. And I apologize that I won't show my face, but just listen. This will be an ASMR video. Anyway, I tried recording this as much as I can and put more details on Noli Tangere and Meditations at the same time, as the best of my abilities. Without further ado, let's start discussing. So this segment, I'll call this the speed round portion, since I'm gonna discuss Meditations and Noli Tangere as quick and understandable as possible so we could go deeper on it. Alright, let's go. Meditations, the summary, basically to deceive or not to be deceived. Well, to be honest, we are deceived by our own senses. So to not be deceived is to follow God, basically to believe that God exists and it will not, and not it. He will not deceive you. That's basically it. Probably. The context of it. René Descartes wrote this. He was a French philosopher. He died of pneumonia. And this book was the starting point of modern philosophy. Modern Western philosophy. The overall analysis and themes, since it is the starting point of modern Western philosophy, it discusses skepticism and dualism. Now, we go on to Noli Tangere, the summary. Since I'm gonna discuss about Crisóstomo Ibarra, I'm gonna tell him his story first. So Crisóstomo Ibarra, he wants to build a school, but he couldn't, so he left. Now, I'm gonna discuss more of it, but basically, that's what actually happened in the story. Next, context. This was written by Jose Rizal. And what was the driving force of this book? Obviously, it was the Spanish colonization of the Philippines. And, Rizal died in 1986, 2 years before the Philippines established independence from Spain. So, still a win even though he died. Alright, the overall analysis and themes of this book, it focuses on colonialism, religion, power, revolution, reform, and education, and also isolation, to be honest. And now we're gonna focus on the character, which is Crisóstomo Ibarra. So here, let's go focus on his history. Okay, early history, he was born, of course, in the Ibarra family, raised by his father, Don Rafael, and he returned home because he studied abroad, and he realized that his father died because he was killed, quote unquote, by Spanish friars. What else? He had enemies because he wanted to build a school outside the Spanish friars, and it got turned to worse that he almost tried to kill a priest for trying to assassinate him, but it was never proven, so people hated him and he tried to escape, and he did escape thanks to Elias. Now we're gonna go on his personality. He was an earnest and idealistic young man. He believed in the power of education to enact reforms. And he was unaware of his enemies and believed some forms of oppression were necessary for society to function. So yeah, that ends the speed round of what you need to learn about this video. And we're gonna go on to the next one. The first, meditation. So it is subtitled as What Can Be Called Into Doubt. So it opens up on meditator that he acknowledges himself that sometimes that the senses can be deceived. Supposes that it is not God, but some evil demon has committed itself to deceiving him. He can also, so if we suppose there is no God, then there is an even greater likelihood of being deceived, since our imperfect senses would not have been created by a perfect being. So Descartes was the first to raise the mystifying question of how we can claim to know with certainty about anything about the world around us. And no one can actually live in skepticism, and it is very difficult to justify its dismissal. Or maybe you could. I don't know. I can't. Anyway, well, applying this meditation to the story of Crisóstomo Ibarra, where it is, I think, would be a great example of when he was having a discussion with Philosopher Tasio. Philosopher Tasio was deemed as a madman because, people believe that madness is when you don't think as they do. And he made his point about that he neither thinks nor live according to their laws. It's just that his principles, his ideas are different. I think that would be a great application to it. That, that sometimes, not everything has to be to live in your way. You're not the main character of this story, Brittany. If your name is if you're listening to this, Brittany, I'm sorry. But that's it. That you can't, it is normal to doubt things. And sometimes what you actually see in the world is actually real. So sometimes it is best to question, what the hell is happening? The second meditation. Now, I think we all know this, mainstream philosophy quote, which is, I think, therefore I am. But, actually, it's practically wisdom. Because in this, it focuses on now that the meditator remarks that the only certain thing remaining is that there is no certainty. He concludes that in the strict sense that he is only a thing that thinks. So in this part, he basically doubts what he sees, about his memories, about the senses. He has no body, that extension, movement, anything. But he is certain that he only thinks. He is a thing that thinks. He may exist without any other of the attributes that I've said, but he cannot exist if he does not think. So you could say that this quote is practically wisdom. And it is also best to note that doubt is the origin of wisdom. See that shit. Anyway, applying this on Noli Me Tangere, I think this would be a great discussion on Don Filippo, where he talks with Ibarra again. He says there that everyone pays more attention to something bad rather than to a needed good thing. Suddenly, it's all fear and lack of trust. Everyone thinks about himself and no one about other people. So I think it was great to discuss here about the Spanish colonization, that we always assume that they're always on the right because they're powerful and we always feared them. And we all lack of doubting if they're actually right. And Don Filippo says that he says in his quote that they're always right because we always let them be right. That's why we're so weak. I think that's what's powerful about doubting, and that in the world we were conquered by Spaniards, that we could be just things that don't think. So basically we don't exist. I think it's a great example to discuss the second meditations in the time of the Spanish colonization, that sure, we may be rejected of our senses, of our bodies, or anything, but there's only thing that is certain, that we are a thing that thinks. We are a thinking thing. Therefore, I think. Therefore, I am. Right? The third meditation. Now, we already know that the meditator is certain that he exists and that he is a thinking thing. But the problem is that in order to confirm the truth of these perceptions, he has to prove that God exists. A benevolent God does exist. If God were a deceiver, he could be deceived even with respect to his clear and separate perception. So even if you're sure about your perceptions, and if you think and God is a deceiver, then it's worthless, because God is the most perfect being, as Descartes describes. So this meditation, I think, would be best applied onto Elias's perception about his life, because there was his great art when he says that I have had to believe a great deal in God because I have lost my belief in men. So I think it is also applying to meditations that, men are not perfect. We are imperfect creatures. That even if we share our own knowledge and wisdom, it can still be doubtful. So what would be less doubtful from the ideas of men? Like believing in chance, could be the same as believing in miracles, right? We need a miracle. So God. So a good God. So we have to be sure that God is good. Is he though? The fourth meditation. All right. So I have discussed in the third meditation. Is he a good God? Does God deceive us? Where in actuality, surprise, surprise, he's not. Because since the will to deceive is a sign of weakness or malice, that was written in the meditations, that if God does deceive us, then it's a sign of weakness. No, but God isn't something like that. God is a perfect, complete, supreme being. Why would he do that? So basically, in the meditations, that the reason why we get wrong, why when we doubt and then anything that seems wrong, it's because we aren't perfect. We don't have his perfection. That is why we always get wrong. So we're the sad boys of this relationship. We are always wrong, and he is always right. So the meditator suggests that you might find perfection if he looks at God's creation as a whole. And so basically Descartes is denying that God could be a deceiver. He's a benevolent God. So I think this would be applied on Ibarra's story now. Now we're back on Ibarra. When he was in prison for his crimes. When he was talking to Elias, he said, yeah, you're right, Elias. But man is a creature of circumstance. Because, as I told before, that's his personality, Ibarra's personality, that he doesn't know that he's unaware of his enemies. And, he was blind. He was disgusted of what he knows now. That man will always deceive him. Not always, that could deceive him. And that is why in meditations, like, who could be the perfect guy or the perfect being to understand conception of good and existence, right? Our boy God. The fifth meditation. Now, this meditation focuses on the concept of essence, right? So the meditator asserts that God is the guarantor of his clear and distinct perceptions. He admits that he cannot constantly fix his mental vision on any particular perception. At such times, doubt could creep in. Thanks to God, sometimes clears him up. So here, Descartes wants to explain that God's existence is an essential property of God's, so that God can't be conceived of without existence. This is kind of confusing. So I would like to apply this on Elias, on his quote when he was with Ibarra when they were talking about politics. He says there that our customs, our mode of being, which they are always invoking when they want to deny us our rights. They forget completely when there is something they want to impose on us. I think this is a great example of how our Filipino identity could be a bit confusing, because we have been, at the time of the Spaniards, what does it mean to be a Filipino? We've been removed of our rights, our customs, the way we live, that sometimes we lost our essence. And I think that is very important here. I think Descartes wants to discuss of the essence. For give an example on God's existence, that we should find our own essence. That I think that essence is that we exist. So how can we exist? We think. The sixth meditation. Now it focuses here on, right? We keep on dunking on senses, like senses should be deceived. Like, then what is the purpose of this? So Descartes concludes it by saying that that's why our senses can go wrong, is that the senses can give us good clues as to what the world is like, but we should not use them as a tool for pursuing the truth about the nature of the body. So basically, then what should we use? Since we're talking about rationalism, reason. And I think this would be best explained, best applied by in Elias. That he says there that in our country, since there is no society, since the people and the government do not form a unified structure, the latter must be more lenient. Not only because more leniency is needed, but because the individual, neglected and abandoned by the state, has less responsibility and has been afforded less enlightenment. I think it is best to explain here about the meditations that we can't be enlightened from our senses alone. I think it's not enough. From what I've been learning from Descartes is that we need reasoning and also the doubt of what we actually know. And I think that is what is important to Rizal's work, is that we should doubt on what our colonizers doing to us, that they think that they're on the right, but actually they're in the wrong. Then I think that's the important message on Rizal's work, that we have to question. And also to Descartes, like we have to question what we actually know. That's amazing. We doubt. And yeah, crazy. So, conclusion. What did we learn? Nothing. I'm just kidding. I mean, rationalism is an interesting topic to discuss. And what we know about rationalism now is that it uses reason. It only uses reason. And what's interesting with Descartes' work is that he gave us a concept of systematic doubting and formal skepticism. And there's more, obviously the famous quote, I think therefore I am, we could not exist if we do not think. And, rationalism employs reason to the production of knowledge. And you can see it works. We have sciences like biology, physics, psychology. It works. But is it the only thing that we can know about the world? No. There is empiricism, which I will be discussed sooner. And now, what do I think about meditations? It's like a Bible with no religion words. I don't know. It's like a Bible, but it proves to us that God can exist. Because, who does this thing? Why do we have free will? Or who gave us free will? Or how can we think? Or how can we prove that there is no deceiver? Right? It's just amazing. You can freaking think. And yeah. And it's also interesting to add on to Noli Tangere that this is a book about systematic doubting, not to the way you think about knowledge like Descartes' work, but to question our own identity, our essence as Filipinos, and our conquerors, whether are they right or are we right. So even to Filipinos who are in the Spanish side, like, do they question us like, are we the bad guys? And yeah, so what's next, right? And as always, thanks for watching.